Hi, my name is Brian Murnion, and I'm the Executive Director of the Mitten Film Festival. Thank you for joining us today on this virtual conversation. We'd like to thank our presenting virtual sponsor, Tito's Handmade Vodka, and our major sponsor, Kibler and Kurt. Today, we're joined with the director of the short film, Bernadette. Zoe, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Zoe, this film was produced and filmed in France, is that right?
Yes, in Paris, France.
Paris. How did that take place in that country?
Yeah, so it was because I was getting my master's degree in screenwriting in Paris, and so we have our own sort of production period. So I wrote the script, and the school provided the equipment, but that's pretty much it. So we had to, find locations, get our crew together and cast on our own we pick people to fill those like head roles of like production manager, first AD, DP, all of that. So it was definitely a challenge because you had to have I don't speak fluent French or anything, and so you're contacting like location owners and who speak French. So you had to have people on your team that were that spoke French and were able to like make those connections as well. So it was definitely a challenge, but we got it done.
What was it like shooting just in a different language and a different country for you?
It wasn't too uncomfortable for me because previously I'd gone to school in Spain, and I've been to Europe quite a few times, so it wasn't like my first time in Europe. And I know for a lot of other people it was, so I think for them it was more of a challenge. But for me, it felt very natural, and it's just like working with anyone here, for example, like the actors want to act and they have similar motivations, and the crew wants to so we all have the familiar language of cinema. So it went very smoothly, I think.
So apart from the kind of that language barrier, was there any other moment during this film that was challenging or something that you had to kind of overcome to make it happen?
I think actually most of that kind of was in pre-production, because production I feel like went very smoothly. There wasn't too many hiccups or anything, but pre-production really was the biggest challenge, getting everybody together and location scouting, because Paris is they do films there, they shoot a lot, but at the same time, if your setting is, the suburbs of Paris outside, filming isn't really a thing they're exposed to, so they don't really understand the concept, even if you explain it. So it is this kind of back and forth of here's what we're doing, and here's what this actually means, because I think a lot of times they didn't quite understand like what that 20-person crew or 25-person crew looks like in their home if it's set in a home. So really figuring out locations and setting times and dates and being very organized was, I think, a big challenge on top of the language barrier.
Zoe, what was the genesis behind this story?
Well, actually came from, it was like a writing prompt, but the prompt was just an image. So this photographer, and I can't remember her name, unfortunately, but it was this photo of this young girl and this older woman in the background in at their home. And so I was just kind of inspired by this image, and I created the story with that in mind, of being centered around this 14, 15, that's kind of how old she looked, a young woman, kind of on her own. She was separated from her mother. So I thought it'd be really interesting to explore that relationship, but also her relationship, leaving the nest, so to speak.
When did you know that the script was ready to shoot?
When it was the first day to shoot. I feel like the script always was, being changed and altered, not only to meet certain scheduling conflicts, but also working with the actors, and they were very involved as well with the characters, and they were like, oh, I think my character might say this, or they'd say this a little differently. So even shooting, we were like adjusting the script and changing some of the dialogue and some of the action. So I think, yeah, it was an ever evolving, script and process. So there was never one. The only time it was official is, once we finished shooting and put the edit together, then I was like, okay, this is the script now.
What was it like to earn the trust of your talent, especially in that final scene, or one of the final scenes where, the male character had to sexually harass the female character? What was that like working with those two actors?
It was great. They were, I think, 90% of directing is casting. So I felt like I gave prompts and they were the ones that brought it to life. They were very open, and I think even on set, that day in particular, I remember was kind of a hectic day because we were running a bit behind schedule. So we had this almost, not frantic energy, but this energy within the crew of like, okay, we got to get this done. We got to shoot this. But this is such an important moment within the film. But I think that also aided in the actress's performance, because she was a little flustered and confused, or like she wasn't sure what was happening completely because we didn't really have time. But I think for her, it was kind of pushing her into that situation really brought out that performance even better in my eyes.
How important is it to tell these stories, to show these little nuances? It's not in modern cinema, these types of moments where you see the reality of assaults and unwelcomed passes or pushes onto other people. How do we tell those stories, and how do we get better at identifying and bringing those things, to audiences through filmmaking?
Right, exactly. I think, at least for my film, it's really about, because if you watch the film, there's nothing graphic that happens. You don't really see too much. It's just this subtle moment. And I think that more rings true to a lot of other people's experiences. Like, of course, there are the more intense, like aggressive interactions like that, but we don't really see the ever so slightly, oh, this makes me uncomfortable, or I don't like it's more dramatic that is shown in cinema. So I just think it's really important to show these events for what they truly are, because there were some people I know that read the script and they said, oh, like this film isn't about anything, like nothing happens, and it's like that's kind of the problem, is you don't see that this is a problem, so it's not always this big dramatic thing that happens, and I think film should show reality to a certain extent of, this is what happens. So I don't know, I think it's just it's an important story that isn't told very often.
Yeah. What is why is it important to show reality, to show truth, and to show kind of realism in film versus fantasy and the more mythical side of filmmaking? Why is it important to show reality and to document reality like that?
Well, I think even with fantasies, there is some, level of reality in that there are human characters. I guess unless you're, making a film about aliens, 90% of the time they're human characters experiencing something within maybe our world or a fantasy world. And I think humans connect with humans. So we can pull, whatever we want from different situations and whatever the filmmaker or the writer wants us, wants that message to be. And so I think for my film, mine was based in reality, more or less, and I think it's important because it's just another view of different situations. I don't think there's one right way or wrong way, but I think from my own experiences, this is something I want to see because I haven't seen it that often. So, and even for audiences that don't quite understand it, they're just like, oh, I don't really get it. It's like, okay, well, it's fine that you don't get it. this is just what also happens. So it's just exposure to something else that they might not know.
Mm. What kind of feedback are you getting from audiences on this film?
I think they, so far they're enjoying it, and they're enjoying it for the fact that, of course, this thing happens, but I think that moment when she returns to the store and she kind of, reclaims that space in her, and her, her childhood, her youth even, is what people seem to enjoy the most. Because I mean, that part, I guess you could say, really isn't so much based in reality, because in those situations, you don't usually go back, and claim your stake and steal candy and all of these things, and what she does is kind of what people wish they could do in those situations. So I think that's why people are enjoying it, because it's like, okay, maybe I couldn't have done it, but she can, so maybe I can in the future,
Yeah, I'm so glad that you created that film and had her go back and she planted a stake by doing that and showing up and facing him, and it belittled him and it put him way down here. And it was just it was a powerful but very simple scene, very subtle scene, and it's not very common you see that kind of subtlety in film.
Thank you.
Is there anything that you're working on that you would like to share? Anything coming up?
Yeah, well, I'm actually going more into series writing. So just kind of delving into that and how that differs from, feature or short films, that structure of this continuing story, and maybe how characters' arcs are a little more subtle, but the situation that surrounds them changes so frequently. So I'm working on a web series called Automotion that kind of, delves into that as well. So.
Yeah, we'll keep our eye out for it. Send it our way when you have something done.
Yeah, definitely.
Is there anything you want to add in closing to our audience watching the film?
No, just thank you so much for watching it, and I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it, and hopefully that comes through. And yeah, I'm excited for its North American premiere.
Well, we're excited to have it, and thank you for making this film and for being a part of the festival. We really appreciate it.